Okay, I did once Mivtzoyim on a plane. I have several stories about doing Mivtzoyim on a plane. And I went down the aisle. It was actually pretty good, an LL plane. And I went down the aisle and I was asking people if they wanted to put on tefillin, and a few people did and a few people didn't. I came to one guy. He was a short sort of a guy, and he looked like an older sort of a fellow, maybe 60s, 70s could be. A short, stocky fellow. His shirt was open. You know, he had this sort of hairy chest, and he had a big Jewish star hanging there. And I said, would you like to put on tefillin? So he looks at me and he says, all of a sudden his whole complexion sort of changes. He says, no way. I'm not going to put on tefillin. I'm not putting them on. No way. I'm not going to put on tefillin. After what I said, okay, you know, you don't have to put on. He said, after what I saw in the Holocaust, I made a vow I'm never going to put on tefillin again. I'm angry with God. So I'm not going to start arguing with this guy, you know, Holocaust. I went through the Holocaust. I went through nothing, you know. Once I lost my wallet or something. That's the biggest, you know, tragedy I've ever had in my life. So this guy, so I said, okay, you know, I understand. He said, no, I saw terrible things. I made a vow. I'm not going to. I said, all right. And I looked at his eyes and I saw that, you know, he really did see these things, and I just didn't want to have anything. I just didn't want to have anything to do with it. You know, I didn't want to hear it. So he said, listen, but you should know that I live in Chulon. And I do a lot of good deeds. I help a lot of people. And there's the rabbi of Chulon, somebody, when he sees me on the other side of the street, he comes over to me and he greets me and he shakes my hand. He said, I help a lot of people. I do a lot of good things. He said, but I'm not going to put on tefillin. Afterwards, I said, okay, all right, I understand. I really respect you. And I said, I'm really sorry I asked, you know, and I'm sure you do a lot of wonderful things. And, you know, if you don't want to put on tefillin, you don't have to. You know, you do great things, and you're a wonderful person, and, you know, I'm really happy I met you, and that's it. And I shook hands. That's it. Okay, so I'm asking other people to put on tefillin. I got to the front. I don't know what type of a plane this was. Boeing, who knows what it was. I don't know. But anyway, it was one of the jumbos of LL, and the front row was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there was only like 2 seats. And in front of it was this big sort of empty space. An empty space. It wasn't, you know, that big. It was like almost big enough to put like 1 seat there, but not quite. So they didn't put a seat there. 1 seat, it's just open, and there was no window or anything. The window was next to the passenger. So I saw these paid people that were sitting there. There was 2 of them, a man and his wife. And I said, would you like to put on tefillin? The man says, no way. Not going to put on tefillin. So his wife says, come on, Shmerel, put on tefillin. He says, no, I'm not going to put on. I don't want to. Leave me alone. He says, come on, what do you care? Put on tefillin. Come on, what do you care? You got nothing else to do. So I said, yeah, I came all the way from Kfar Chabad just for you, you know, and it doesn't cost any money, and you'll enjoy it. And it takes 1 minute. His wife is badgering him, and I'm badgering him. And he says, leave me alone. I don't want to put on the tefillin. She says, why not? Why not put on the tefillin? So he says, nah, I was in the Holocaust. We were in the Holocaust. We don't want to put on. So I said, she says, what do you care about the Holocaust? You keep talking about that. She says to us, this story must have been like, you know, 35, maybe 40 years ago. She nudges him, come on, put on. Shmerel says, okay. So he puts on the tefillin, and he says, Shema Yisrael, and that's it. You know. So she says, why don't you put tefillin on Yankel? So I said, who's Yankel? He says, Yankel is sitting back there. All of a sudden comes along Yankel. That was the guy that I talked to before with the, you know, his shirt open and the guy that didn't want to put on tefillin. So she said, oh, there's Yankel. Yankel put on tefillin. So he's Yankel, we went to the Holocaust together. You know? So now the man is also working on him. See, he goes, hey, come on, I did it. You can do it. He said, I'm not doing it. I'm not putting on the tefillin. I made a gazelle. After I saw it, she said, we saw the same thing you saw. Put on tefillin. No, yes, no, I'm not going to put on one. I'm going to put on tefillin. So finally, he said, oh, all right, I'll put on tefillin. All right, I'll do it. But I'm just for a minute. A second. I don't know. He said, okay, put on tefillin. So he puts on tefillin, and he bursts out crying. This Yankel. He just is wailing and he's crying. And these other two people, they're just sort of reading their newspapers, they just, because they've been crying for the last, who knows, for 30 years, so they're already used to it. So he just burst out crying, and he's weeping, and he says, Shema Yisrael, and that's the emotions for me to take it off. So I said to them, now we got to make a bar mitzvah. Today you are a man. You put on tefillin. He says, yeah. So we stood up and we danced. We danced. Am Yisrael Chai. We danced in the front. Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai. And she was clapping.
His wife.
She was clapping his hands. What?
It might cost some money. They can afford it, and she might know people who do it. Like a documentary about him putting tefillin on people.
Hello?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Okay. So and she was clapping her hands, and there was this, and we hugged each other and kissed each other. That's it. So what does it come to show? It comes to show that every Jew really down deep wants to do what Hashem wants them to. But it takes a little coaxing, a little bit of love, a little bit of care, a little bit of, attention. And it takes the right time, and it takes a big blessing, and it takes a certain small amount of courage to do. Simcha. And Simcha breaks through all the boundaries, and so it will be to all of us. Have a good day. See you at 3:00.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Did you hear me?
I heard you say something about making a documentary.
Never mind.
All right. Shalom.
All's
You'll be this.
All's good.
All right. Goodbye. 3:00. 3:00.